appalling statistics, a lot of them seem to be your responsibility.
When we got into office, it was over 40%. 6-7 years before, it was over 40%.
Yeah, but the current government's halved it again.
The current government has halved it again because it had the foundation on which we built. It was 42% when we came into office in the year 2001. Runaway inflation, a depreciation currency, all of those substantial efforts had been made to correct those before we left. But that is not to say that the work was a finished product. It is a work in progress, and it continues to be a work in progress.
It seems to me that what's important about the last few years in Ghana is that the international community, thinking about World Bank, IMF, and indeed the Chinese government as well, they've all looked at what's happening in Accra, and they've given it a stamp of approval by lending and investing in a massive way inside your country. Seems to me, whatever you say about the current Mills administration, the international view is that his economic management is worth investing in.
We have oil. We've never had oil before. We now have oil in commercial quantities, and it's being developed by companies that know what they're doing. And the first oil is really the biggest responsibility for this dramatic expansion of our national accounts and receipts.
Well, are you sure? Because look at the reality. I mean, it's going to be huge because you've got up to 700 million barrels worth in the sea just off your shores.
But that's exactly what it is.
No, but hang on a minute. The reality is, if we're talking about deficits, we're talking about economic management. Right now, you're only pumping about 70,000 barrels a day. So you can't say that everything that's been achieved in the last 4 years is all about oil revenue.
The figures that the President himself gave in the State of Nation Address was that oil revenues last year were over $400 million. There's a huge...
But there's gold, there's cocoa, there's a whole heap of other things. All I'm saying to you is, if you look at China, for example, $3 billion in grants and credit lines, plus another $13 billion worth of infrastructure investment.
All those are very, very welcome.
So you have no problem with that?
I don't have any problem with it. I think the Chinese interest in our country is a very healthy one. It's one that all of us are very comfortable with in Ghana. What we have to be satisfied is that we get value for money in terms of these investments. That is what the debate has been. There are serious questions about it, the way that the loans were structured. In Parliament, we spoke about it in very clear terms. We have continued to insist that much better negotiations could have taken place over the money and how it was to be spent.
And what about the quality of the infrastructure work the Chinese offer? In Angola, there are many people who are now talking about roads being washed away, hospitals subsiding because they were poorly built.
And these are all part of the argument as to making sure that we get true value for money. And that is why there's been a hesitation on our part in endorsing this opening. What it is, and I think that is something that we should make very clear, is that we welcome the interest of everybody in the development of the Ghanaian economy. How we handle that interest and how it plays in favor of the majority of our people, the masses of our people, that's our concern.
And to be clear about it, and I am interested in the way you've hedged some of your approval for what the Chinese are doing in your country. To be clear about it, if you are Ghana's next president, will you, for example, allow them to build up a significant stake in your oil industry and in your extractive mineral industries?
If they're going to do so in terms that appear to us normal and mutually beneficial, why not?
So that's a yes?
Yes, absolutely.
What sort of percentage stake could you imagine the Chinese ultimately
We'll see. We'll see. We'll see how the history will play itself out. Because
the Ghanaian people have to vote for you. They want to know what your vision is of the degree to which you'll let China buy into your economy.
What it is that we will look on a case-by-case basis at everybody who's interested in coming into.
Could they have a controlling stake in
I don't think we want anybody to have a controlling stake in our matters. We don't want to be the pawn of any power, whether it is left, right, Chinese, American, or anybody else. We want the controlling stake in the Ghanaian economy to be in the hands of Ghanaians. That is.
Do you think? Let me ask you this final point on China. Do you look across your own continent and feel that some countries are in danger of allowing China too much power and too much control in their economies?
I think that what it is that we should be all very clear about is that so long as we continue to be raw material producing countries, changing the destination of the export of those raw materials doesn't necessarily change the basic facts of life of our economies. And it is the changing of those basic facts that is the critical challenge for us. So seeing China becoming now the destination of preference for the export of African raw materials. As far as some of us are concerned, it doesn't change the facts about the African economy. It is the fundamental nature of the African economy that we require to change if indeed we're going to bring prosperity to the mass of our people. And that is to move away from raw material producing economies to industrializing value-added economies. That's the challenge for us. And to the extent the Chinese investment, American investment, French investment, Japanese investment, come where it is, British investment, plays into that fundamental objective, I welcome it. To the extent that it attempts to dilute or divorce itself or veer away from that, I would be critical of it. Because our fundamental objective is what we need to see established in our relations with whoever.
Yeah, all right. Well, I've got that point, but I've been reading some of your campaign speeches over the last few weeks and months. You consistently accuse the Mills administration of overseeing rampant corruption. I think it's fair to say, looking back through Transparency International reports and many others, that corruption's been a problem in your country for a long time. Yeah. Certainly goes back beyond the Mills administration into your administration and beyond that too. But I just look at what the current government has done, for example, signing up to the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which the Angolans, for example, refused to do, introducing proposals for transparency in the auditing of contracts and other things in the oil business. Seems to me they're making a real effort to do things differently in Africa.
But at the end of the day, what are we left with? For instance, in the management of our petroleum revenues, our original position was that we should create a special petroleum account outside the consolidated fund so that we can look and track these revenues in an open and transparent manner. Because if you put the monies directly into the budget, the difficulty exists of finding out exactly how they play out. That, for instance, was a position that the government did not subscribe to, that we should create a special account which would enable the tracking to take place.
Do you believe that, as is perhaps the case in Nigeria and Angola and Equatorial Guinea, there is a real danger that this discovery of major oil off the coast of your country could become a curse rather than a blessing?
That has to be a concern for all of us Ghanaians. And the only way we can address it is the institutional arrangements that we make in the management of this new resource. It has to be. It has to be a constant source of anxiety and worry for each one of us, that if we don't put in the proper mechanisms, the proper institutional arrangements, it could be it shouldn't be. It should be a source for us of additional resources that would enable us to focus on the transformation of our economy.
I just wonder why the Ghanaian people should believe that you are any more committed to a transparent oil industry, and not just oil industry, but transparency generally in the relationship between politics and business than the current administration. Because frankly, your record as a justice minister and senior minister in the previous administration doesn't suggest that your values were any different from theirs.
The values are very different. First of all, we're talking about people, I'm talking about us, who were at the very forefront of the struggle for democracy in Ghana. And what does that mean? That means that we want an open system of government, accountable government. And that has been the very strongest driving force behind the political careers of many of us who are now today in the opposition. Making sure that our country didn't become like, so it had become in Africa, one-party government, authoritarian government, that would be open democratic government. So that's the first. The second is the record in government. And many of the measures that were put in place to ensure transparency, the Whistleblowers Act, the procurement law, all of these were legislation that were began by me when I was Attorney General in order to create the framework that would enable people to go on. I mean, for instance, the Whistleblowers Act, what we're saying. The first time it was tested in Ghana the whistleblowers under President
sure, I understand what you're saying, but
ended up in jail. They didn't.
But the greatest indictment, frankly, of your government is the way in which you squandered money and left this huge hole in the budget deficit. And I think you would now acknowledge that that was a profound problem the last time your party was in power.
I don't accept that. I don't accept that proposition at all.
Well, I'll tell you what the Ghanaian people, it seems to me, from reading a lot of stuff in the Ghanaian press, want to know is where exactly is the money going to come from next time around, if you're in power, for some of the very extravagant promises you've made. You, for example, have offered free secondary schooling for all Ghanaians, a promise you say you absolutely will deliver in 4 years in power. So have you costed it? How much will it cost?
The costing is being done. I mean, very, very soon we will be in a position.
You can't make a promise like that.
No. Very soon we're going to be putting it out.
You don't know how much.
I do know, but I prefer to tell the Ghanaian people directly before I tell you.
Many of them can't talk. You can tell me, and
doesn't matter.
Know.
I would prefer to make that statement to the people of Ghana directly first, as to the cost. And any
so you do know the cost.
Oh, we do, and we have a very good idea how also we're going to finance it.
Well, you're obviously not going to give me the figures, but just tell me how you're going to pay for it, because it's clearly going to be a very great cost. You've got to train the teachers, you've got to build new schools.
All of that has been adequately costed, and we believe that, first of all, the new revenues will help, more efficient management of what we have now, growth in the Ghanaian economy. These are the three sources which are going to enable us to fulfill that promise. And it is a promise that has been solemnly made to the Ghanaian people, and is going to be solemnly kept, not because it's a campaign promise, but because it is a necessity for the future of our country, to educate all our young people, and not to acquiesce in a situation whereby only segments of the community that have some money are able to educate their children.
It's an interesting
point.
It's a
major issue of human capital development.
Indeed.
And if we do not make the effort to achieve that, the development paradigm that we want to achieve is going to be very difficult for us to do.
Let me quote to you the words of Patrick Awuah, a Ghanaian who used to work for Microsoft in the US. He came home, he set up a private university just outside Accra. I believe it's very successful. He says Africa's reached an inflection point. The march to democracy across the continent is unstoppable, but he says we can bring change in one generation. The key is how we train a new generation of leaders. That, he says, will make all the difference. Sounds like you agree with that.
I do.
Well, in that case, here's my last thought to you. You, I'll be polite about it, but you're a veteran politician in Ghana.
Absolutely.
Your father was president. You've served in 2 administrations from 2000 to 08. You have an elite background. You were educated in the UK. You've been around a long time. Doesn't Ghana need a new generation of leaders to fulfill this promise?
The Ghanaian people will make that decision. I mean, that's all I can say. The Ghanaian people will make that decision, whether or not a new generation of... I think that at all times what you're looking for is whether people resonate, whether people are articulating the views and aspirations of ordinary people. Do you think you can connect with ordinary Ghanaians, given everything I've just said about your background? Absolutely, and I think that the evidence is out there. The evidence is quite clear out there. If one
well, it isn't yet, because you lost the last election.
By a hair's breadth. By a hair's breadth. If one was so out of touch with the realities of the lives of ordinary Ghanaians, perhaps the margin would have been even stronger. I think that you can look at the statistics either way. But I have no difficulty in asserting that indeed one connects and will continue to connect, because you're talking about the matters of concern to ordinary people, their access to education, their access to jobs, how the economy is impacting on their lives, whether or not it is going to be possible for us to continue to operate the kind of economy that we've been operating so far. These are the critical questions.
They're the questions, and you will have to answer them in the election campaign. I hope we can have you back when you are president, or indeed if you fail to be president.
You're wishing me.
Thanks for being on Hard Talk.
Thank you indeed for having me.
Thank you.